Jared Hamilton, welcome back to the pod, man.
Thanks for having me, bro.
I appreciate you being flexible. I
Of
know
course.
we're recording like 2 hours, hour and a half before you hop on your flight. So
That's right. The earliest podcast to date, but
Mhm.
we're good. So.
Good. I was trying to be something so I could be memorable, get some type of a title in there. But
That's right.
We're coming off a big weekend, long weekend, but I think a good one. And you just spoke at Lead Summit.
Yep.
And talked to a bunch of our coaches on really what I think is your superpower, man, which is knowing your audience to an extremely crazy granular level and nurturing them.
Yep.
And I think it would be super helpful. First, because I know a lot of coaches like listen to this podcast. Talk about like the role you feel like that nurture and I guess middle of funnel, because a lot of people haven't heard that terminology, plays for you and your business.
I think the analogy that comes to mind is a bridge. That's why I use it in my slides, because everyone talks about like top, middle, and bottom of funnel, like in terms of the unactual like liquid funnel, right?
Yeah.
But I think of nurture as a bridge, because if you think about it, like when someone finds you, it doesn't matter what avenue it is, no one trusts you, even if you're like let's say referrals, best, most trusted form of advertising ever, but it's still like, hey, John Doe said you're dope, but that's about as much as I know.
Yeah.
And it's not a matter of someone just knowing you and seeing that you're capable of making results. I truly think the secret sauce is when people understand conceptually your methodology, how you create results, or how your thing is, and then they go, that's it for me. That's what I've been missing. I think if we look at our own buying behavior in our lives, I think most of us find that we subconsciously want to know that answer as well. So I think of the role of nurture as a whole, as the bridge that gets someone to go from we'll say a lead, or someone that goes, hey, I got your guide, or I'd follow you on Instagram or whatever. But then if they're over here paying you for, let's say, high ticket coaching, well, what is the bridge that closes that gap? And that's where I think the role of a very well done nurture sequence and just nurturing your audience and going deep with them is. It's why, like, I can't remember which speaker said it, but it's like the average consumer has to consume 7 hours of content before they buy, which is wild. But it's because they have to go deep. They have to go across the bridge. And it's going to take so long for that 7 hours to go on Instagram Reels in 30-second bits, if you even go deep enough. But most people's top of funnel content is surface level. So it's like nothing but tips, tricks, and freebies. So you have to be able to go deep and get them across the bridge.
Well, transparently, it's why a lot of light bulbs went off for a lot of people, including myself, whenever, it's all the same stuff that we teach, right? But it's easier to teach it. And then you realize whenever you see somebody like yourself talk about it, like I feel like all of my content after doing some reflecting has all been middle of funnel content, right? Like I'm not posting any or putting anything out there with the goal of top of funnel, like let's just get a bunch of eyeballs. And it's easy for me to start spinning my wheels and be like, well, why am I my content could easily, like you could just watch my content and get to 10K a month, like that's why is this not doing better? But if people don't know who you are, like if you don't get eyeballs there, that like everybody that's watching right now has already paid us in some way, shape, or form. So I think for me, it's transparently middle of funnel content. That's why I started the podcast.
Yeah.
And I realized the power of it the first time that I got on a sales call. And I always ask that question, like I talked about in my speech, of, are you kind of set on working together with me, or do you have more questions about what that would look like? And the guy I was on the call with said, no, man, I've been listening to your podcast for a while. Like, I'm ready.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh,
done.
Okay,
done.
Cool. Let's do it. And then we're in. And that's when I kind of realized the power of it. But a lot of coaches, yesterday on our first kind of like group coaching call of the week, we're talking about like your talk and Will Jerome, because he kind of talked about a little bit of some of the same stuff, really opened their eyes a lot.
That's good. Well, the other reason I wanted to go that direction with my talk, because I wasn't going to hyper fixate on nurture as much, but after listening to the talks on day one by all the other speakers, I didn't want to just hammer home more top of funnel or content create. I didn't want to, because there are already great topics on that. And I didn't want to just, well, here's my version of it. I just didn't feel there was much value there.
Yeah.
But I thought to myself, what do I feel like I'm good at? And I feel like this is it. But then also, after just listening and hearing conversations of other coaches, I think there's a gap of understanding what nurture is. Like I was chatting with someone or a handful of people, and I said something about like, cool, well, for you, what is nurture? Then they're like, oh, adding value and being relatable. I go, awesome. Is what else? And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh no, I just want to add value. I go, okay, well, so for you, and like, what's adding value mean? And they're like, oh, just posting helpful content. I go, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
love that. And every time I had this conversation, it was, I want to be relatable and I want to just post value. And then but it's no wonder why no one's getting to where they want to be. Like, or if there's ever resistance buying or things like that, is because I can be as relatable as I want. I can share my dog, share my wife on social media, show my lifestyle, be vulnerable. But that doesn't mean people are going to go, I don't understand what is so special about your process. Is going to get someone who struggled for their whole life like me results.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think part of nurture is not just value, but like opening the whole curtain and showing your process. Like, dude, I literally have people show up to sales calls and they're like, I know I'm in stage one. I know stage one is my issue. I have to, like, I know I'm not ready for your stage two. I know exactly about your frameworks on the podcast or the YouTube, whatever. And for them to show up to a podcast with that information, it's over. So,
Yeah. And another thing that I found interesting was you talked about at the um, end of kind of your talk of the balance between the three, right? Top of funnel, middle funnel, really the balance between those two. But what ideally, because we had, excuse me, what ideally was is that balance for you?
between top and middle.
Yeah, what is the balance between middle of funnel and top of funnel in terms of content? We had a coach ask that yesterday of like, okay, what should that frequency be?
So I think this is going to be dependent for everyone. So to go a little bit deeper. I mean, truly top and middle of funnel, I would argue are on different platforms
Mm,
entirely.
mm,
For the most part, they're entirely different mediums. I think if you have a top and middle of funnel when it comes to, like, let's say Instagram Reels, I think middle of funnel content on a reel is still like a subset of top of funnel. It's almost like in my, like, since everyone here, most people here are fitness coaches, it's like fiber types. Um, like you have like 2A and 2B or whatever, like these different things. Whereas it's not just these two fiber types. It's, well, in like fast twitch, you technically have like the two and then like the one or whatever, but
mm,
it's kind of the same thing. So I think truly middle funnel is your bigger, longer form pieces, YouTube videos, Instagram lives, Facebook live, group lives, podcast, blogs, email lists, where you don't have a limit. I think that is like the defining factors, where you could spend 30 minutes, or someone could read your shit for 30 minutes and get through everything on a concept. I think when people post middle of funnel content on like Instagram, you're still capped at 3 minutes.
mm,
I don't think you're going to truly nurture someone in 3 minutes. I think you could start nurture enough to go, I want to learn more. Like, for example, let's say I take a complex subject like binge eating. It's like my thing. I could do a reel on binge eating and I could do a podcast on binge eating, but which is truly middle of funnel, which is truly where people go, that is a masterclass.
yeah.
And it's going to be even if I can do it in 3 minutes, what can I do in a half hour? You know what I mean? Like, imagine taking this weekend and distilling it into an Instagram reel.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same. If you came here this week and it was nothing but nurture, it was
Yeah.
nothing but truly deep understanding. And it's no different with these other platforms. So I think everyone should be posting every day, or if not multiple times a day, on their top of funnel short form content to find people. Because I think I mentioned this in my talk. I think of my top of funnel content in two very unique avenues. Either get eyeballs on me, like my, so a little bit wider, not as deep, a little bit wider, of getting people to hit the follow button, to go, who is this guy, and I want to learn more. And then the second type of top of funnel content I create is a little bit more middle of funnel esque, but it's a little bit more depth. Like, instead of like a broad thing, it may be deeper. Like, a broad thing for me may be like five, 7 reasons you're gaining your weight back every
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
That's pretty broad. Anyone who's in the realm of weight loss is gonna like lean in.
Mm-hmm.
But if I say, but a middle of funnel piece of content will be 4 reasons you're binge eating that are hiding in plain sight. Not everyone who needs to lose weight binge eats, but binge eating is one of my unique problems that my ICA struggles with the most. So I made a very unique piece of content on binge eating specifically. So I went from wide of how to not gain your weight back to now I'm going deep of 4 reasons you're binge eating that are hiding in plain sight. And then at the end of that, I'm going to have a CTA to a podcast I did on binge eating. And so that way, the idea is new eyeballs come in with my top of funnel. And then the slightly deeper top of funnel content is scooping those people to things like email lists, YouTube videos, or podcasting. Then that's where I can go hella deep with my middle of funnel.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think it comes down to is to answer the question of how often, what frequency. I think you should be posting top of funnel like every single day, if not multiple times a day, so because people don't know you exist.
Yeah.
And then I think you should also be going middle of funnel. There are that other category where you're moving people to different platforms, but I think you should have a really good middle funnel strategy at least once a week, a podcast episode a week, a YouTube video a week, a weekly email newsletter, a Facebook live in your group every week, an Instagram live. Not all of those, just pick one of them, whatever medium you like best. And then the longer you do this, you can do more. It's like a fat loss client. Like you're not going to have them do 18 different habits at once. If they're good with tracking, now you might throw macros. Mm-hmm. Now you might calorie cycle. Now you might throw periodization. Now, and as you go through, you can add more. It's the same thing with this.
Yeah, no, I think I completely agree with you, and I'm always surprised at each kind of stage of business, because I think it is the exact same thing, and it's just like progressively overloading your muscles in the gym.
Yeah,
you can, if you would have told me 2 years ago that my schedule would look the way that it looks now, and I'd have 40, 50 Zoom calls a week and have all these things going on and all that, I would have been like, that's impossible. Like a person can't do that.
Yeah.
Right. But I had all the little like miniature steps of like, okay, now I'm averaging 10 Zoom calls a week, and then 15 Zoom calls a week, and then 20. And then the business is kind of like grown at each stage. But if you had also told me that on top of that, managing 7 employees or whatever we have now, it's like, it's a lot now, but it doesn't feel, it just feels like normal.
Yeah.
Right. But I've kind of like slowly worked up to that. So I think that's a good kind of metaphor for what we're trying to do here in terms of these styles of content. A question based on what you were kind of talking about: do you consider your lead magnets and free resources that you create, do you consider those middle of funnel, or do you consider them, again, that bridge, the nurture bridge, as like, I'm going to give you this value, and then now you're getting into my middle of funnel through me sending you podcasts, me sending you emails, me sending you in nurture sequences?
I think lead magnets, and this is just my opinion, I think they are the bottom of the top of funnel and the top of the middle of funnel.
Okay.
Like, I think it is like on that bridge. I think it is this first step onto the bridge.
Got it.
I think because it's one was making them a lead, right? Because now you have their contact info, they're in your CRM and these kind of things, but they're not nurtured yet. But it's the thing that is required to nurture them. Right. I cannot write to someone on my email list until they're on the email list.
Someone giving you permission to nurture them.
For sure. Or I cannot have someone listen to my podcast without them going subscribe, So I think it is the start of that. Like when top turns into middle, I think it's right there. Because you may have different reasons. I have friends that they use a very more broad topic to get people into their middle funnel, like calorie calculators. That's a very top of funnel side of things, or a macro cheat sheet, or a ebook, or whatever. Like, I think it just depends on kind of what your thing is, because I've played with both. I've played with more top of funnel resources. Like I have one I call the 20-pound blueprint, like your exact step-by-step play to lose your next 20 pounds. That's pretty top of funnel. But if I did a binge eating survival guide, that's very specific. Only people that binge eat are going to pick that up.
Yeah.
Right. But anyone who wanted to lose weight might pick, so that's why I think there's value in testing all of them. But I would say it's where one transitions to the next.
I like that. So the last time you were on here, we talked a lot more on the emotional side of things, right? We got into, therapy and some of your journeys there. How has that continued to progress over the last year since we talked?
A lot. Still going. I mean, still go to therapy probably once a month or so. And literally, I've just been pouring into more of my own stuff. You
had just started a new therapist at the last time.
Yeah, dude, she is.
Still working with the same one?
Yeah. She's a killer. Like it's funny. And I say this not to like intimidate anyone, and it's like a coach. Some people have different needs for different coaches, but after having gone through therapy already, I don't think I could have handled this therapist when I started, but this therapist is exactly what I need. She's almost, if you listen to her, she sounds like a coach. Like a coach challenges you, leans in a little bit more, calls out bullshit. Like, versus my first therapist was very much like a talk therapist, and which is what I needed. And like, she's like, cool. Well, how's that make you feel? Well, tell me about this. Well, tell me about this. Well, what's coming up for you? Versus the therapist I work with now does that. But then she's like, oh wait, you're the one catastrophizing. Well, wait, no. That's your pattern. Nope. Whose voice is that? Nope, you need to shut that. You need to shut that shit down. You need to nope, that relationship isn't serving you. You should probably end that one, or you should probably put a boundary down with that person, or whatever. And so she's great.
Mm.
I've actually been trying to get her on my podcast, but I guess HIPAA and bullshit won't let her. But
Yeah.
I really wanted to have her on my podcast and like chop it up with her, but
Like a live session or what?
no, not like a live. I want to interview her on inner child work
Mm.
and about like the work we've been doing, because that's one of the biggest areas that I've been focusing on. So one of my favorite things, and I have my clients do it, is in the world of therapy or psychology practices, you have this concept called inner family systems, or IFS. The cool thing with that I like about IFS, about not over, but compared to a lot of other methodologies, is it forces you to feel things, because most people and high achievers, they want to intellectualize this stuff, and you just can't. It's like if I were to say, Baker, how do I just pick that? How do I like think about picking that up? And you're like, just pick up the plant, and I'm like, I just want to think about pick. It's like you have to just pick it up. You can't intellectualize picking it up. You just have to literally grab it and move the plant.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of IFS stuff, it forces you to feel and see parts of you never had before. Because a lot of times, whether it be something like emotional eating, or whether it be something like building a big ass business, or whatever it is, a lot of the things that we do now started as coping mechanisms when we were kids, because we didn't know any better, right? Like I have clients that they didn't know how to handle mom and dad's divorce when they were little, so that's when they started turning to food, and that was a means of protection. Or I know a lot of businesses, or a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs who felt unworthy and not good enough, but they felt really worthy when they built things.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, I think I'm going to do this. And then now they're like on this hamster wheel of achievement to feel better about themselves. Well, that was a coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't dive in and go inward, and but specifically from an inner child perspective. So that's a lot of stuff that we've been doing and working with. And I've have a couple other more spiritual teachers I've been working with over this past year. That like my big thing, if I had to say my big thing for 2024 was surrender. I had to, like, cause I redid my entire business. I had to see parts of me I've never seen before. Found patterns I've never realized I had before. And part of that was I had to see that stuff. It's gross. It's like, fuck, that's not good. And then choose to let go and not be a control freak about stuff and things like that. So it's been 2024. That's why I think 2024 is a very nice tee up for 2025. I think this is going to be a big year for me, but I think I had to have 2024 of a year of surrendering and letting go, and not being quite as in survival as much, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I mean, you've been talking to me about kind of like and I was right there for your entire switch up of your business model, and you know, by the end of 2024 you had it basically equivalent to where you kind of started it with the other model, and then now you're kind of back up there.
Yeah.
And I know you have some sort of pretty lofty goals for 2025. You invest a lot of money in mentorship, and you know, we just talked about therapy, but just coaches essentially in all aspects of your life. What has been the theme of some of those relationships, I guess, as you ended 2024 and then headed into 2025? Like what are the things? Because I find with mentors and friends and people that I look up to, I find myself in very similar conversations with all of them, because that's just like what's happening and that's what's on my mind at the time.
Right.
You know what I mean? So are you finding, is it, you know, IFS related stuff? Is it like, what has been the theme of those conversations with your mentors in this season of your life?
I would say it's a couple of things. I would say every mentor that I listen to and seek counsel from teaches me conceptually how to think. I think someone telling you what to do is a very short-sighted thing. But I think if someone can teach you how to think, it's a skill set. It's like my goal is, like, to make it applicable. My goal this week was not telling people how to nurture. I wanted people to think about nurturing differently so they can apply that in their own aligned actions. I didn't want to say you have to write email. It's the only way you can nurture, and you just have to give away all your secrets for free. That's what, if I said, tell me how to nurture, I would have said do that. But I wanted to teach everyone conceptually how to think. They're like, oh, that means this could be nurture, but this would be nurture too. Then this would even be nurture. These are the components of nurture. So then you can take that and run with it. It's why you can drive any car, not just your truck. Right? You conceptually know how to drive any vehicle. I think any mentor I've worked with, they do that really well. Is they don't say this is the only way to do this. It's conceptually how to think, and then I can apply that to whatever I'm working with. there's a level of that, but then the other underlying theme I would say as well, is letting go, is letting go of expectations, letting go of things that don't serve you, letting go of old things that you used to do that just aren't don't feel right anymore.
Mm.
Right? Like for example, I used to the way I built my business before was my 10 out of 10, but then I kept growing in my awareness and what I wanted in life, and I go, well, that's a 5 out of a 10 now. Well, I don't want to stay there just because I got there. You know what I mean? Like imagine being in a relationship that you like, it was a high school relationship and you were like, this is awesome. But now it's like, I hate this person. We
Mm-hmm.
don't fit anymore. We've grown apart. You don't want to be like, well, I've already committed 5 years.
Yeah.
I guess I'll stay with them in the next 70. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's been the other piece to this for me is from like a mentorship perspective is the things I have to let go of, things I have to not try to control. I think of letting go and surrendering kind of like holding like something fragile. Like if I held a baby duck, if I am afraid of losing it and dropping it, I'm death gripping it and I kill it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I don't hold it at all, it falls. But I
Mm-hmm.
think there's a nice balance of loosely holding it. And it might go away, it might not, but I think there's a balance of that. But then also not forcing things. Like for me, I used to convince myself of like, oh, and to do things, and I would like force outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most things should not be forced. If to force someone on a sales call, it's not a good fit. If you're forcing business tactics, it's probably not what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel a lot of like that kind of thing, I think it's a problem. So I think for me, it was getting aware of where I was forcing and having a little bit too much expectation. For me, I'm really trying to live by the motto. I heard this from Eli Wild for the first time I heard it was having high intention but low attachment.
Yep.
Because I've always struggled with like having a goal but not like chasing it and becoming like attached to
Obsessed.
it. Right. It's like it's almost like that switch is either on or off. But I think the high intention, low attachment, or one of my mentors' name's Kyle Cease is he says it's this or something better. And I kind of like that idea of like, all right, this is what I want. I want to build the business this way. So it's either this of what I'm thinking or something better. And whatever, if it doesn't go the way I want it to go, well, then it's something better,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's not the way I wanted it to go.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Even if it's like, let's say we have to take a step back. Well, it's still, if this isn't working and this is falling apart, it's probably supposed to fall apart. So it's this or something better. So it keeps you a little more adaptable. So,
yeah. Having heard from everybody that you heard from, I know you did a couple of podcasts and different and had some deep conversations with some of the speakers. Having heard from everybody this weekend, and you were present all weekend, which I thought was awesome. I want to thank you for.
amen.
You were talking to coaches. You were, sitting in the room the entire weekend. You were asking questions, all that stuff. So I appreciate how you showed up. But what what are something that you, or what is something rather that you took away that you think maybe, hey, I could go implement that in my business somewhere?
I mean, I literally think I'm pretty sure. I mean, I took stuff away from just about everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to go into any room and be like, I'm better than this or whatever.
Yeah,
There's literally things you can learn anywhere, and you also find what you look for.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to find, if I'm like, if going to like, oh, I know more than they do about this, well, then that nugget I could have gotten is gone. Like the brain's just like, no, we don't need that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's stuff I took from everyone from like whether it be Maureen, and I need to like up my volume game. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe I could crank out of more content and maybe if it was just less produced, right? But like that may have been mine from her, or I had some really great ideas from hearing Paula's talk about how she approaches her challenges, about
Mm-hmm.
some things I could do to help in my coaching group, like
Yep.
some of the things that she talked about. I loved Will's conversation around some different retention strategies and touch points and things like that. I thought were great. Who else was talking? The stuff about with Zach from ads, like half of it went over my head, but
Mm-hmm.
I still think it's the idea of just like some of the things he talked about was huge. I took notes on all these handful of these things too, and then yeah, I mean
Matt Vincent.
Matt. I literally as soon as Matt finished, I go, "Do you want to go upstairs and podcast?" Because
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to like keep him going, and
Mm-hmm.
we came up and podcasted a lot of it around getting out of your own way and stuff. I'm like, wow, I needed to hear that. Oh, I need to hear that too. Like,
He just makes, he'll just throw something out and you're just like, oh my God, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
Like whenever he's like, how cool is it that we get to get up and do what we do every day? And that's like a common line that you might hear, right?
Yeah.
But he said, we literally do fake work for a living.
Yeah.
And we get paid for it.
Yeah.
And he's like, no time in history could you do fake work And like he's just talking about like cavemen and you have to move the boulder off of you or
Yeah.
stuff like that. Like he's like, you're just doing fake work and we're getting paid for it.
Yeah.
You have to wake up and do that every day.
Literally,
This is awesome.
because of our, I don't think he mentioned this in his talk, but our private conversation with some of the work he's done, like in other countries and stuff. He was talking about he went to, I can't remember where it was, that they don't have a water source,
Yeah.
and he goes,
Uganda.
yeah, Uganda,
Mhm.
and he goes, they literally get up and walk 6 hours a day to go to a water source and like carry it back, but it's every single day. And I happen to like be in the shower, and I'm like, how why because of that, and I'm like, it's wild. I literally walked 8 feet from the bed, and I literally can turn on this faucet and use as much or as little as I want, and I'm just billed at the end of the month, and it's never ending. Like if I like left for a week, it would come back and it'd still be. I'm like, it's just these little things we forget about it. You know what I mean? And it's yes, Matt has some perspective shifts that's like
He
makes you
does.
think a little bit differently. So.
Yeah, the dude's just so wise.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I thought like I was a grateful person, and then he's like, "Here's what I do for gratitude every day." I'm like, "Fuck,
180.
5 times a day."
Mm-hmm.
He was like, "I do that," and I'm like, "Wow!" And he goes, "5 times a day." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you do that's it's just crazy."
Yeah.
But I think his thing he mentioned that really hit is he's like he knows his patterns so well, and so he puts a system in play to combat those patterns. He goes, "I cannot get the voice in my head to shut up about I should be better." And he goes, I say shitty things to myself.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, I'm going to be disgusting to myself. And I don't know how to shut that voice up, but I know if I have more inputs than outputs, I'm good. So instead of just being a victim, he goes, I put these systems and processes in place to help and combat that. And I just think if everyone did that, like I go, wow, what systems could I put in place for it, literally anything? I think that's how we should approach any of it. It's like James Clear says, we always fall to the level of our systems. So
Yeah. Yeah, I thought Matt's was phenomenal as well. And I think it was very well placed too, because what I was worried about is that second day being too info heavy because we just had so many, everybody on the, I wasn't worried about you because you just communicate for a living. Like you're very good at clearly communicating. But on the day one with leads, everyone on that day is like good at getting leads. So they're very good at communicating. They're very good at making people understand what they're trying to say and getting people to take action. Day two, not that anybody on day two was like not good at communicating, but
Sure.
those are more the analytical people. It's like, okay, we have the leads now. How do we turn that into money?
Yeah.
And that's funnels and systems and super in-depth processes. And so I was worried about day two getting like too heavy on X's and O's.
Yeah.
And I thought his was very, very well placed. I honestly, especially without us curating any of the content, us just being like, these people are probably going to help more with the lead side. These people are probably going to help more with the funnel side. Like without us curating any of it and saying, you talk about this, and placing it, it was like, I don't think it could have.
No, dude, I was thinking that too. Like as you were saying that, is I forgot that you never really like, hey, here's kind of the general vibe we're thinking, but they're like, it's like a tattoo artist has total creative control. And I think that's why so much magic happened is you didn't like, we go back to letting go and surrendering and kind of like having an intention versus like a married goal versus telling, I want you to talk about this. Yeah. But it was like, whatever you feel most compelled to talk about, here's the day it's on. And so, and that's why I don't know if you know this or not, both Matt and I changed I changed my talk and did it all at 11:30 the night before.
Yep.
And Matt did his Matt did his that morning. It was because I was like, okay, here's what I'm going to talk about. But then because what I heard on day one, I go, it doesn't feel right anymore. Yeah. It feels repetitive now. Thing. Yeah. And then I think that's just magic happening. So,
and then you have like Will Jerome. Will worked on his presentation for 2 months.
And you can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, because his was that in depth and that heavy. And so I thought it went perfect. Yeah. It was so cool. And again, I appreciate you being there. But I want to kind of like, if I can direct us into like a last, I guess, topic to kind of go into is for a lot of us as entrepreneurs, right? And I know we kind of hit on this a little bit last time, but that was, 40 episodes ago. So for a lot of us as entrepreneurs, I feel like we struggle to ask for help, right? And we get a lot of times stuck into our day-to-day and we push until the next thing. Like I find myself a lot of times being, for example, recently it was, we started the house and we started a bunch of stuff like personally that we've been trying to do and like moving. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to work like this or sacrifice until until we close on the house. And then it was,
Yep.
well, until we move into the house. And then it was and then even in the business side, it's until we hit 100K a month. And then it's until we get these hires in, until
Mm-hmm.
we get, okay, well, I got the events coming up, and I got to go until the event's done.
Sure.
And then now it's like, we're traveling again in March until March. Like, we got these events in March. And how I guess do you have the humility as an entrepreneur to ask for help in all the areas that you ask for help? And then also, how do you keep your feet where your feet are and just be where your feet are,
Yeah.
and not always keep pushing, whether that's a goal or a sacrifice?
I think there's a lot. There's number one is when to ask for help. I'm a big fan of zooming out.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like if I look at this microphone like this close, I can't even tell it's a microphone.
Mm-hmm.
But when you zoom out, you have perspective, right? And I think it's like we look at with like our clients, where I go, cool, you could starve yourself today.
Mm-hmm.
You could work out for 3 hours, and you would make insane progress on paper. But let's zoom out.
Mm-hmm.
Can we do that long term? Well, no. Well, what happens if we do it long term? Well, and if we get granular on that, then it's really logical what to do, right? So I think for me, I look at it like, if I don't ask for help, I'm gonna burn it to the ground. If I don't ask for help, I'm not gonna be okay. If I don't ask for help, I correlate it to what negative ramification is gonna happen, because it's hard, man. Like literally delegating things or reaching out, asking for help, it sucks. You feel like a bitch. You feel like you should be further ahead, that you should have it figured out. Like those are all normal things. But I think being aware, like, what would you tell a client?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think it's number one is asking for help is one of the best things, most humble things you can do.
Mm-hmm.
In recognizing, that you may not know it all, or whatever the case may be. But I think for me, what I do specifically is I zoom out and go, if I don't make sure this checks imbalance is happening, or if I don't get the help that I need, things are going to fall apart. You know what I mean? If I like, if my marriage doesn't feel good, I'm like, okay, I want to talk to her about it, or I want to ask for help around it. Otherwise, a divorce will happen.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't reach out to my mentor around, hey, I'm not happy in my business, which is what I did, I would have continued to build a business that I would have resented. Excuse me. And whatever it may be. So for me, I'm such a big fan of zoom out and make it logical. Right. I think it's so easy to get tied into the emotional side, where we make really dumb decisions,
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest one for that. And then as far as being present and keeping your feet on the ground, I think is a system thing, because just like you mentioned, if left to my own devices, I will be anything but present and be
Mm-hmm.
aggressive at the next thing. It's a conditioning response is what
Mm-hmm.
it is. But in the hard part where entrepreneurs struggle with this is we're really good at it. Right. So it's almost like we do something negative with that has a positive outcome. I can shut down.
Get the dopamine response.
Yeah, dopamine, but I can also like shut down a lot of icky feelings and be productive.
That's what, sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
That's what I struggle with, I think, is because I will buckle down and go, 60, 70, 80 hours a week for periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I see a positive, like the business grows, or like this person on the team's developing.
Yeah.
Or this client saw this massive win. And I'm like, that's what it took. That's what it takes, Like, I've got to do that stuff.
Yeah. But I think you could focus on, like, here, but the crazy part is you could do that every day though.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We find what we look for. Like,
Yeah.
you could find those things that help you daily. But also I think of it this way, like, what would you like, and I would say this to anyone, what would you tell like your wife?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you would not say, shut your happiness down and work 80 hours a week, and then you're allowed to take a break when you see a result twice a month or twice every other month.
Yeah.
Right. Like, what would you tell her? What would you tell any of the coaches you mentor, whatever? And I think a lot of it is like, we have to take our own advice, and we're the worst at it.
Mm-hmm.
We know everything. We know all the stuff, but we're the worst at taking it. But like I'll have these conversations with my wife, and I'll have something slip out like that of like, well, I feel like I need a or like, oh, I feel like I haven't earned the right to take a break yet. And she's like, would you tell that to anyone else? And I'm like, fuck. You know what I mean? Where and I think we have to do that. We have to put our perspective in the right spot and have these little checks and balances with ourselves. It zooms out and gives us logic again. Mm-hmm. But I also think we need to have systems and processes in place. And I still struggle with this, but I'm the best it's been. Is I have like, if I'm feeling like after a lot has gone on, I'll take a half day off. Right. What I used to do is grind until I had to take days off. Yeah. But now like it works so much better. Like I'll get my big rocks done, and I'm like, you know what? I think I need to take the rest of the half day. Mm-hmm. And then I will recharge the half day. Man, I'm back in the swing of things. I think the other thing too is look at it as a productive thing. I know for me, when I'm doing what the things that fill my cup, spending time with my wife, going to jujitsu, working out, spending time with friends, traveling, like when I do these things, it fills my cup. So in the moment, it may not feel like revenue generating activity, but at the same
It
time,
does.
it changes you, and wherever you go, there you are.
Hmm.
Right. Like I have friends of mine that whenever they go on vacation, they literally have leads, so many leads they can't handle it. And it's because they are taking that version of them that's higher, that has better energy, that's showing the light, like all these things. And they're like, it's weird. We go on vacation to make more money. A mentor of mine is really helping me with this, as he thinks you should be a multi-dimensional creature and
Hmm.
you should thrive on all dimensions. He goes, being in business is great, but it doesn't matter if your marriage sucks.
Hmm.
He goes, if you're in, or if you're fat, or if you're whatever, where he goes, if your marriage suffers, does your business suffer? And the answer is, well, yeah. So then wouldn't it be a good idea to put your marriage on your, just on the same level as your revenue? And everyone in the room was like, well, yeah, that makes sense. He goes, what about you? What about your body? If you don't move, you don't get off your desk, and you feel like a fat piece of shit, is your business going to suffer? Logically, yes. Cool. So maybe we should put our body back in the priority. And I think looking at yourself like a multi-dimensional creature
Hmm.
and having targets around all the dimensions is helpful.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. And and it makes, I mean, it's the same stuff that I get coaches on my calls, and they're talking about burnout and stuff. I'm like, when was the last time you took a break? Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
first thing that I go to every single time is like, step away for a bit. Like
Yeah.
go fill your own cup because you can't fill all these others. So it really is about just taking my own advice and pushing some of that stuff in there. And I mean, it sounds so kind of stupid actually saying it, but so there was there was a period of time where there was a lot going on. So it was right before we were starting to kind of hire a few people. So it was still Mike Felicity and I. We were in a really uncomfortable phase of growth, and I mean I know it's like first world problems, uncomfortable phase of growth, but
It sucks
it was
nonetheless.
stressful. It was very stressful at the time. And then at the same time in the coaching business, we ran a scholarship, and we had it was at the end of a very stressful week, and then I had probably 60 calls throughout the weekend from 8 to 8, 8 to 8,
It's wild.
and then I got back into another
Yeah.
call with 60 more, 70 more calls the next week, and it was my I had a couple of friends that came to town, and they had like a layover in Dallas for a night, and they it sounds stupid, but I took like 3 hours off, hours, 3 hours off, and just to go to dinner with them, and just like put my phone, like turned my phone off,
Yeah.
like set it on the table, took off my Apple Watch or put it on Do Not Disturb or something, so I wouldn't keep getting like buzz, and I was just present at dinner
Damn.
for a few hours, and it was really cool because they told us that they were expecting, and so it was like awesome to kind of
Wow.
celebrate with them and just be there. But I felt so much better the next day, but I
Yeah.
also felt like at what how bad does it have to get for me to be like, oh yeah, I took a few hours off last night and I felt amazing.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that put it in perspective for me too, of just just filling your own cup, doing something like that, going to dinner with the wife, going out to eat with a friend, or going to cigar lounge and going to hang out
Yeah.
and just smoke a cigar and have a good conversation. Like that's the type of stuff that I feel like and maybe anybody that's listening that struggles with some of the same stuff needs to hear.
I think a lot of it too is the concept, you said it, is and I don't think enough people think about this, is being exactly where your feet are, which is really hard. Um, I heard this on a commercial or for a movie or whatever I think it was, and it was this. I don't even remember what movie it was. I think it may have been one of the Guardians movies. But the guy was at the bar by himself, and the bartender was like cleaning like the glass or whatever, and the guy goes, "All right, bartender, lay some bartender wisdom on me," and he goes, "Well, I think you're trying to go somewhere, and I think once you get there, you'll want to be somewhere else. So maybe you should enjoy where you're at right now." And I'm like, "Fuck." Like
Mm-hmm.
I was heavy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and for me, I caught myself for the longest time doing that. And if I'm not careful, it's a pattern I can fall into. Whereas when I'm working, I'm thinking about, oh, I should be spending time with my wife on date night. I should be working.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm working, I'm thinking about, oh, I should go to the gym. And then when I'm at the gym, I think, oh, I should be working. and we're never actually where our feet are, and it's a pattern of not being present. And then we throw should on top of it, and then we call it shoulding on yourself. Because at the end of the day, what happens is when we should on ourselves, I should be further ahead, I should do this, I should be doing that. It's like this internal manipulation to do something different wrapped in a bow of guilt.
Yeah.
And it never helps. And it is actually drags things even lower. Shame and guilt are some of the lowest internal frequencies you can have in your body. I actually think it was, I can't remember which psychologist said it, but shame is, I want to say, they said, is the most toxic emotion you can experience. Shame is. But every time when we start shooting on ourselves, it's nothing but shame and guilt. So for no reason, and that will burn you out faster than anything versus being present. But imagine like trying to be present like right now, but if I'm like, well, I should be working, I should be answering email. Like it taints everything. So I think part of it is reminding yourself to just be where your feet are. So when you're working, work. But when you're with the wife, be with the wife. When you are in the gym working out, be there. But the problem is none of us are programmed this way. We're all programmed to go to the next thing. So it is a constant battle mentally until you hit a good stride with this. So
yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's I always feel like I get a little bit of clarity every time we talk just on a lot of this stuff. So I appreciate you, man. Appreciate you taking the time. I know we got to get you to your flight here. So we'll get you to the airport, but I appreciate you taking the time, man. Appreciate you just being here and being where your feet are all weekend.
Appreciate that.
To be present for the event. So it means a lot to me, man. And again, I know I said this last time, but I hope to have you on again soon.
100%, man. I appreciate it.
All right, brother.
All right. Woo.
Cool. That's great. Boom. Sorry for turning that into a therapy session.
Dude, no, I'm all about it. I love it.